How did World War I start? The main cause was the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand. He was assassinated by a man named Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist with connections with the secretive military group called the Black Hand. This event propelled the major European army towards war. Many agree that the descent into war was partially due to the gradual emergence of a group of alliances between great powers. By the year 1900, the British Empire had taken over many countries, and France had control of large parts of Africa. Nationalism. The Congress of Vienna, held after Napoleon's exile to Elba, aimed to solve problems that Europe was facing. Delegates from winning allies Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia decided upon a new Europe, which left Germany and Italy as divided states. Strong nationalist elements led to Italy being reunified in 1861 and Germany in 1871. The loss of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany left France angry at the settlement at the end of the Franco-Prussian War and keen to regain lost territory. Large areas of Austria-Hungary and Serbia had differing nationalist groups who wanted freedom from the states in which they lived. Alliances. Many alliances were signed between the years 1879 and 1914. Some countries had no option but to declare war if one of their alliances declared war first. Yo man, come to this war I'm going to?
I don't want to, I just don't feel like it.
Come on man, everyone else is going.
No, I don't feel like it.
Come on man, please. Just come.
I will. Okay, right.
Great,
yeah.
that's great. Who was involved? Before 1914, the great powers were in two large alliance groups. There was the Triple Alliance, which had Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente, which included France, Russia, and Britain. As the war went on, the two sides changed significantly. Germany and its alliances were the central powers. The war started to involve countries that were not part of the Triple Entente, so the opposing side was known as the Allies. Italy joined the Allies in 1915. Some other allied nations included Portugal, Japan, Greece, Romania, China, and multiple South American countries such as Brazil and Peru towards the end of the war. The United States fought with the Allies from 1917. Life in the trenches. Trench warfare. Trench warfare is a type of land warfare with fighting lines consisting mainly of military trenches, in which troops are protected from the enemy's smaller firepower, such as machine guns, and sheltered from artillery. The most famous battle of trench warfare is the Western Front in World War I. Trench warfare occurred when improvements made in firepower was not matched by advances in mobility, resulting in a form of warfare where the defender held the advantage. Both sides constructed complex trench and dugout systems along the front, protected from assault by obstacles such as mines and barbed wire. Life in the trenches. Troops typically slept in dugouts into the trench walls. They ranged from small holes to relatively well-reinforced bunkers. The Germans generally had better dugouts than the French, who had nicer dugouts than the British. Troops slept more during the day than at night. At night, every unit was sent out in groups to repair/improve obstacles in front of the trench, such as barbed wire. This was nearly impossible during the day due to the fact that anyone who climbed out of the trench would be shot immediately. During the early stages of the war, soldiers ate just over a pound of meat, a pound of bread, and 8 ounces of vegetables every day. However, by 1917, the official ration for the average British troop was reduced significantly. Since fresh meat was more difficult to come by, the ration was reduced to 6 ounces of corned beef. Soldiers on the front line were given less food.
What is this?
It's your lunch.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it for today. Here, I'll pick this up for you. Yeah, we're kind of short on food, but we'll try to get you more tomorrow. Canned stew and biscuits was what most of the soldiers ate. However, the meat was mostly fat. There was also a shortage of fresh fruit and vegetables, causing many soldiers to have stomach aches, which brings me to my next point. Problems with the trenches. Trenches were very dirty. They also flooded in bad weather. Many trenches had pests such as rats, lice, and frogs. Rats were a problem because they ate the soldiers' food and the actual soldiers themselves while they were asleep. Lice also caused a disease called trench fever. It made the soldiers itch horribly and caused fevers, headaches, sore muscles, bones, and joints. Large number of soldiers suffered from trench foot. Rain would flood the trenches, making them dank and muddy. The long exposure to wet, muddy conditions causes trench foot, which in extreme cases could lead to the foot being amputated. Cold weather was dangerous as well. Many soldiers lost their fingers and toes due to frostbite. Some even froze to death. No Man's Land. The area between two enemy trench lines was called No Man's Land. No Man's Land was often covered by landmines and other obstacles such as barbed wire. The distance between enemy trenches was typically between 50 to 250 yards. It was called No Man's Land because, as mentioned earlier, anyone who tried to climb out of the trenches during the day would get torn apart by a swarm of bullets. Getting over the top. This phrase was used in World War I by British troops to describe the moment they emerged from the trenches and charged over open land to attack the enemy. No soldiers looked forward to this, and many of them had regarded it as foolish and dangerous. Impact of the war. Deaths and injuries. The official number of military and civilian casualties in World War I was around 41 million. There were over 18 million killed and 23 million that were wounded. The number of deaths ranged from 9 to 11 million military personnel and about 5 to 6 million civilians. The Allies lost about 6 million military personnel, and the Central Powers lost around 4 million. 2 million were killed by diseases and 6 million went missing, therefore presumed dead. Military mistakes. Many military mistakes were made in World War I, but here are the three of the largest ones. The unrestricted submarine war and the German Zimmermann telegram. This dragged the United States into the war. The Italians abandoned neutrality to opportunistically attack Austria-Hungary. They lost many men and gained nothing. France and Britain were trying to break through the stalemate in the Western Front throughout 1915 to 1916. This lost more than 1 million men, instead of trying to isolate Germany by pushing Turkey and Austria-Hungary out of the war more quickly by pressing the Balkans. The poets. Sassoon and Owen. Wilfred Owen was born on the 18th of March 1893 and died on the 4th of November 1918. He was an English poet and a soldier. His war poetry on the horrors of trench and gas warfare was influenced by Siegfried Sassoon, who was his mentor. Siegfried Sassoon was also a poet and a soldier, who wrote similar poems about the horrors of trench and gas warfare. They met when Owen was diagnosed with shell shock and was sent to Craig Lockhart War Hospital in Edinburgh for treatment. It was during his visit to the hospital when he met Siegfried Sassoon, who changed his life. He would go on to write some of his most famous poems. These poems included Dulce et Decorum Est, Insensibility, Anthem for Doomed Youth, Futility, Exposure, and Strange Meeting. Shell shock. Shell shock is a phrase created in World War I to describe a certain type of post-traumatic stress disorder. Quite a lot of soldiers were diagnosed with this during the war before PTSD was even a term. It was a reaction to the intensity and horrors of fighting that produced panic attacks and being scared or have an inability to reason, sleep, walk, or talk.